the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. How many Israeli government leaders will end up in prison? Sunrise and sunset for the premiere of the new Fiddler, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now on this episode of the Week in Review. Hello and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. Israel will be setting a new standard for government corruption next month when both a former prime minister and a former president will be imprisoned at the same time. And there's a decent chance they might soon be joined by a former chief rabbi. Former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert's sentence will begin February 15th after an appeal slashed the sentence from 6 years to 18 months. Olmert was convicted on multiple counts of bribery in the so-called Holy Land affair, in which real estate developers were found to have paid cash bribes to government officials. On appeal, one of Olmert's convictions was overturned. He remains convicted for accepting a bribe of around $15,000. These criminal activities brought down Olmert's government in late 2008. After police investigators recommended that he be indicted on a number of corruption cases, Olmert stepped down that September, leading to the eventual election of current Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Former Israeli President Moshe Kassav is already in prison and has been since late 2011 for an array of charges on rape, sexual harassment, and other activities. Kassav is serving a 7-year sentence. And then there's former Chief Rabbi Yonah Metzger, who has been indicted on a wide range of bribery, money laundering, and other crimes. Investigators reportedly found hundreds of thousands of shekels hidden in the holy books in his home. Metzger was indicted in February and is awaiting trial. Meanwhile, Jewish terrorism and racism against Palestinians continues to rock the Jewish state. A wedding video has become international news because it shows a far-right crowd celebrating the deaths of a Palestinian family who'd been killed by Jewish terrorists. The Dawabsha family had their home set on fire in July, and 3 of them, the 2 parents and an 18-month-old boy, eventually died from their injuries. In the video, one man can be seen repeatedly stabbing a picture of that baby, Ali Dawabsha, while others wave knives and guns and sing along to a song that quotes a Bible verse about gaining revenge on the Philistines, with the crowd singing Palestinians instead of Philistines. 2 guests from the wedding have reportedly been arrested. The bride and others at the wedding have previously been arrested for extremist activities. Moving on to a Jewish celebration of song and dance that's replete with decency, the opening night of the new production of Fiddler on the Roof happened this week. Meredith Gansman has that story.
For the final Broadway opening of 2015, the stars came out to celebrate the return of a musical tradition, Fiddler on the Roof.
It's a perfect theatrical experience.
And it's about family, it's about love, and I can't think of a time where we need to learn about love and freedom and survival right now.
And yes, it's very, very Jewish.
What it means is the story of our history, of our ancestors, for so many of us. And that really makes a very deep in my heart, deep place in my heart.
Although the story is about Russian Jews, the musical speaks to all cultures.
When Fiddler played Japan, they came to Sheldon Harnick after the opening in Tokyo and said, Fiddler, so Japanese.
Other attendees were most excited to see theater favorite Danny Burstein lead the musical as Tevye.
He is a mensch. He's a full-blown mensch. He has got the biggest heart, and he puts it in his work.
Even with all this support from entertainers of stage and screen, before the opening of the 5th Broadway revival of Fiddler in its 50th anniversary season, musical lyricist Sheldon Harnick was feeling some pre-opening jitters.
I always am nervous opening nights. You never know what happened. The ceiling could collapse, you know.
One of the scenes that keeps audiences on the edge of their seats is the bottle dance, in which, during a wedding scene, reception entertainers dance with bottles on their heads. And I was curious if any of the opening night attendees ever danced the same.
No, I mean, not on purpose. Like that wasn't the plan. Eventually, we put bottles on our head and we danced, but that was, it was New Year's Eve. Somebody brought maraschino cherries that had been soaking in, I don't know what, from I don't know where, Appalachia, if you know what I mean. And it was a crazy night. Several bottles broke.
After the opening night curtain call, I caught up with Harnick, who was much more at ease. Still nervous?
Not now, no. No, none of the scenery fell down. And the conductor didn't lose his baton. Nobody's pants fell down. So it was just a wonderful production.
It was a good night.
It was a good night, yeah.
However, the debut of a new framing device at the musical's open and close, Tevye, bareheaded and in a modern red parka, did leave Harnick questioning.
I know that some people are extremely moved by that, but I also know that some people are puzzled by it. So I have mixed feelings about it.
The new blocking and the striking red coat reminds Harnack of the global refugee crisis, just as the Jews in the Anatevka shtetl were once forced to leave their homes.
I don't think the ending has ever been more moving because constantly we're subjected to pictures of the Syrian refugees, and immediately we think of that when we see these people carrying their few belongings around the stage, and it's almost painful.
Stirring these raw emotions, director Bartlett Sher hopes will draw audiences into the story.
How do we place ourselves in the circumstances of our own past, our own identity, or of the current problem?
And so, even with its 5th revival, sounds crazy, no? Perhaps an ingrained theater tradition can take new shape.
Fiddler on the Roof isn't an old chestnut. It's not something your grandfather loved. It's a relevant, important show for today, and that people need to see this show and grow and learn.
Fiddler on the Roof is playing now at the Broadway Theater.
Thank you, Meredith. Finally, this week on Up Close, what should we think about people who seem to have almost an obsession with helping others? The story of pathologist Bennet Omalu is now a major motion picture starring Will Smith. But if the National Football League had had its way, Omalu's findings would never have seen the light of day. His devotion to telling the truth about head injuries in football and how he developed that devotion is told by Jean-Marie Laskus, author of Concussion. And then, so-called do-gooders sometimes place the lives of complete strangers ahead of those of members of their families and communities, and even their own. Is there something wrong with them, or are they on the right track? New Yorker staff writer Larissa McFarker talks about her book, Strangers Drowning, grappling with impossible idealism, drastic choices, and the overpowering urge to help. Here are some of the highlights from my interview with Jean-Marie Laskus. One of the really scary things about this whole thing with head trauma in football and in other contact sports is that not only is it information that's been hard to find for decades, but it's literally hidden even while people are alive. It cannot be diagnosed while people are alive. How has it been to peel back the layers of that story and to show how this really hidden information is impacting so many lives?
It's hidden in so many ways. Not only is it a hidden disease inside the brain that you can only diagnose in autopsy. CTE is the diagnosis, it's only when you're dead do you get to know if you have this thing. Similar to Alzheimer's in that way. But more insidious, I think, is that the disease, as it was discovered back in 2005, has been, the National Football League has systematically tried to hide it. So it's like hidden on top of hidden. We as the public and as the fans of football and as the players and their families haven't really been given this information.
There are people out there who are talking about balancing the risks and benefits, and if you have a series of risks, there's some increased likelihood of brain trauma, of depression, and so on and so forth resulting from brain trauma. Well, but look at the great benefits of being a professional athlete in various ways. But the thing is, you need to have at least informed consent in order to weigh those risks and benefits.
You need to have informed consent, and that really is the argument of Bennet Omalu, who figured this thing out. That's all he was trying to do. I mean, he wasn't against football. He was an immigrant from Nigeria who came to this country, a brilliant scientist who didn't know American football, had no agenda. He found this in a brain and wanted to tell people about it, wanted to tell the NFL about it. That's all. They should know. They should know that the players should know that they're at risk. Many of them still are just learning that that's the risk, to say nothing of the parents of kids who are playing. So that's where the awareness really all needs to happen now.
I mean, one of the things that's going on is it's not just that the NFL has a responsibility theoretically to protect its players and to protect its employees, but there's a role there that they play where if they say it's not true, there's not going to be a lot of high school coaches who get to go around saying, no, believe me, I know what you saw on that big broadcast, but actually there really is this disease and here's how we have to deal with it and so on and so forth.
We've been duped. We've been duped. And as a fan, it's like, now I know this. It's like, now we have to have this conversation in this country. Like, what? We know now. Are we okay with this? Are we okay with our players? I mean, how many suicides since Bennett's research? High profile. Dave Dorson, Junior Seau, beloved NFL players, killing themselves, and leaving a note, Dorson did, saying, please look at my brain, something's wrong with me. How much does this have to happen before we say, yeah, maybe there's something going on here? Do we want to be watching this? Do we want to be paying for this? Do we want to be like eating our chicken wings, cheering on as guys are like potentially causing their own dementia, if not certain death?
You can see the full episode of Up Close on the Jewish channel on cable. You can also listen to the full audio of Up Close as a podcast available on iTunes or in your favorite podcast player. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish channel, be well. The Jewish channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 1640, IOUPLINK Channel 505, RCN Channel 268, Cox Cable Channel 1, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, and on Comcast and the on-demand menu on premium channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.